Good evening, everyone. My name is Thomas Kramer. I'm the Director of Residential Care with Montefiore. Thank you for joining us tonight for our fourth in our Spotlight series. Before we hop in and start into tonight's conversation, I might just hold off for another minute. We have quite a large number of people joining us, and I can see our participant numbers going up, and I don't want anyone to think that they're missing out. So I'll just sit tight for another minute and then introduce the remainder of the panelists. Well, I can see that numbers have started to stabilise there. So again, thank you everyone for joining tonight in our fourth of the Spotlight series, Where Do I Begin? My name's Thomas Kramer. I'm the Director of Residential Care with Montefiore, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight with three of my colleagues that I have the pleasure of working with. Joining us tonight, we have Amy Sender. Amy is our behaviour support lead. She's an occupational therapist and has been with Montefiore since 2017. She has a master's in dementia and is really active in supporting across all of our different units and people regarding a whole range of issues. It'd be great to hear from her. Eliza Baume is our dementia consultant. She has worked in old age psychiatry at Prince of Wales Hospital, has also worked with Dementia Support Australia, and really supports our residents, supports our staff, supports clients in general and their families through people's ageing and changes that happen with cognition. James Waide is also joining us tonight. Thanks, James. He's a help at home coordinator with us. He's been with Montefiore for 7 years now, has worked both in our residential homes at Hunters Hill and is an accredited exercise physiologist. So he worked with our physio team there in Hunters. And in 2019, made the move across into our home care space and supports people there through their ageing journey and helps them access high quality care. Tonight is really meant to be a conversation in between us regarding where to begin. It's meant to be a practical guide for you to really open up topics around discussions of healthy ageing. So how can you talk to loved ones about what changes that are happening for them? How can you support them as they notice changes happening maybe in their cognition, maybe physically there's some changes? What should you do when those changes occur and a diagnosis, any type of diagnosis happens? And also how can you then support and work together to manage and live independently through this time? Thank you again for joining. It's my pleasure to be hosting tonight. Unfortunately, Janine Grossman, our Director of Professional Services, unfortunately is unable to join us tonight. So I've stepped in her stead. And also Houseman, she's also unfortunately unable to join. We have taken their notes and we'll be able to support through some of the things that they were going to talk through in their stead. But Eliza, I might go to you first here and really ask you to talk to us about what might be some early signs or indications of a person having some changes in their cognition.
Thank you, Thomas. It's a really good question, and I've actually prepared a little slide because it's a lot of information to process. So I'm just going to share my screen. Now, just let me know if you can see that.
Yes, it's come up. Thanks.
Excellent. So I just want to preface this with, you are the experts in your loved ones, and it's usually you who'll be the one to notice these sorts of changes in your loved one. And it won't necessarily be something obvious. You might get a gut feeling, or it could be obvious. They could be subtle changes, but we're really looking for patterns and reoccurrences of these things. So here are some of the common ones. So mood changes. What we see sometimes is depression, withdrawing a lot, and other times we might see lability. And what I mean by that is noticing a fluctuation in mood over a short period of time. So someone might be really happy, and then a few minutes later they might be really teary and sad. The second one is pretty obvious. It's memory loss. But it's really more about consistently forgetting new pieces of information. So the things that we notice are that, you know, someone might be forgetting that they saw their son yesterday, or they might totally miss an appointment. They've just got no recollection of making that appointment in the first place. One of the other things we notice is changes or errors in grooming. So you might notice that your loved one is applying makeup in a way that they haven't done before, or they're re-wearing the same clothes. They're not noticing that there's dirt or food on their clothes. They're not washing as often. They might not brush their hair like they used to. Going on to changes in judgment and safety. I mean, this is one of the things that I used to notice quite a bit when I used to do functional assessments in the community. For a person with cognitive impairment, they might forget to look at either side of the road when they're crossing, which is something that is pretty automatic for us these days if you've been doing it all your life. But these are the sorts of things that they sort of start to forget to do. Another thing with safety might be leaving the stove on or putting the stove on too high for something that only needs medium heat. Going on to language problems. So you might find that your loved one has difficulty expressing themselves or articulating what they want to say. And a really common thing alongside that is obviously word finding. So they might have more difficulty trying to find different words to add to their sentences or finish their sentence. Apathy and loss of motivation. I mean, this is a difficult one because when you see things like depression, apathy and loss of motivation can also be a feature and a symptom. But one of the things you might find is that for someone who's been sticking to routines and activities that they've always liked doing, they are less interested or they're more blunted in participating, or they might not necessarily think to participate in those things that they used to do. Reduced stress tolerance for familiar activities is also one. One of the things that is quite common in the community is for a person going to a shopping centre, for example, that for someone with intact cognition, going to a shopping centre can be very easy. You go there, you do your shopping. But for someone with cognitive decline, going to a shopping centre can be very stimulating. You've got lights, you've got people, you've got sounds, you've got an activity that you need to do, you've got a shopping list. And sometimes what we find is that when people go into those situations, they become overwhelmed and they say, I can't do this, and they leave. So what you're noticing is things like that, where someone used to have lots of motivation or they were really okay with doing something, they're starting to pull back a little bit and they're finding it more difficult. Another one is losing items more regularly. And this is also one to just note, because I think about my husband who wears glasses. Every time he puts his glasses down, he loses them. And he will say to me several times a day, have you seen my glasses? Now, at this point, I would probably be worried if he stopped losing his glasses, because that's just a part of his personality. But my point is that it's a long-standing behaviour. It's not a new behaviour. If you've got a loved one who's always been meticulous about putting things in certain places and all of a sudden they're not doing that anymore, then you have to wonder, is something happening with their cognition? And the last one is difficulty navigating a familiar place. So if you've got a loved one who's lived in a suburb for several years or maybe 30 years or all their life, and all of a sudden they're having difficulty navigating home or taking familiar routes that they're used to, you also have to wonder about that too. Yeah, so just a few points, but like I said before, you know your loved one, and you usually get a gut feeling that something might be off. And in that scenario, the best place to start is obviously an appointment with your GP, because there could be many things that are happening medically that might not be related to dementia. So we need to rule out those organic causes first before we go down that path, and a GP and a geriatrician is where you want to start.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I suppose, around a lot of these things, isn't it? Because sometimes there can be a fear when someone starts doing something a bit differently to what they've done before, or they're behaving a bit differently, or you're seeing these changes like you know. But it can be things like they have an infection, and so they're actually acutely unwell. It may not be dementia or a cognitive decline that's progressive. It might actually be they're actually just unwell and they need some support. So getting into a GP is really, really important, isn't it, in that space?
Absolutely.
If you do see these things starting to come up, I mean, for me, the GP would be someone to book in, as you say, but are there other things that we should be doing to support a loved one if you note these, different signs coming up?
Absolutely. So the best way that you can support someone, I mean, I've put a list together, a short list. I mean, I could go on about this all day, but basically do's and don'ts of supporting a loved one with deteriorating cognition. Look, there's so much to talk about here, but I think the most important thing is that if you are the carer, you are so important. Your health is so important, your physical health and your mental health. If you go down, the person that you're caring for goes down. So you can see how it's so important for you to maintain your strength and health. Alongside that, it's really important to connect with support groups, people who are also in carer roles, access counselling. I know Dementia Australia offer free counselling. And just to make sure that you're checking in with yourself, that's a really big part of the role, and a really big part of your loved one's diagnosis is your health. The other thing that I cannot stress enough is set up a mix of formal and informal supports, engage help at home, become friendly with your neighbours, get your friends involved, get volunteers involved, coordinate a roster with the family, because it really takes a village. You don't want to feel like everything is on your shoulders with supporting your loved one. Another one is find a good GP and stick with them. Your loved one needs to have rapport with their GP and the medical team to feel safe and supported. And it's really important having a therapeutic relationship with a medical professional, because that medical professional will be able to have the confidence in assessing and supporting if they've got a relationship with you and if that person is familiar with their face. Another one is to contact Dementia Australia and Dementia Support Australia to learn about cognitive impairment and dementia. They've got loads of help sheets. They've got local education opportunities. I know Dementia Support Australia is actually available 24/7. It's a free line. You can give them a call and you can speak to a dementia consultant and talk to them about what's going on. They can give you some practical strategies. Also, encourage independence in your loved one. So allowing them to practice their functional abilities and their cognitive skills is the best way to preserve and promote their independence. One of the things that we see a lot is that family members supporting a person with cognitive impairment will start to take over and do things for them, like cook their breakfast for them. That's the opposite of what we want to do if that person has been consistently making their breakfast independently up to this point. We want to make sure they continue to do that. We want to keep the neurons firing in their brain and their brain sparking always. And the more that we can preserve those functional abilities, the better it'll be for them in terms of keeping their independence. And not only that, if you think about all the little things that you do in a day, having that sense of achievement and completion is so important. Even just making your bed can start your day off really positively because you feel like you've done something. I guess alongside that as well is you want to preserve current routines. So if a person is starting to experience cognitive decline, and they have a clear routine in their day, like they get up in the morning, they make their breakfast, and then they go outside and they have a cup of tea in the sun. Try to stick to the routine that they have built for themselves, because that's what they're most familiar with. And if you change up their routine, it could be really destabilizing for them, because they will think, what's happening next? So that sense of predictability becomes fractured in their mind. So definitely try and preserve that. Another thing through Dementia Australia that's fantastic is you can actually set up a support group for your loved one so they can connect with other people who have a diagnosis of cognitive impairment or dementia. And if you think about, you know, going to that core sense of needing a sense of belonging, this is so important because they've just entered a stage of their life where they've got a new diagnosis. They probably feel really isolated, and connecting with others going through the same thing is so important. And maybe that's a conversation that you as their loved one can't necessarily have because you're in the carer role. So trying to diversify their social contacts is super important, especially if they can connect with them over their dementia diagnosis or cognitive impairment diagnosis. The other one is encourage choice. So you want to make sure that your loved one is expressing their wishes, giving them options. Don't try and call the shots for them. They've got their own voice. They know what they want. And you have to elicit that from them through giving them options. Plan for activities in the best window during the day. I mean, I'm awful in the evenings. I don't like doing late night stuff. I get too tired. I'm a morning person. I'm a brunch person. Schedule me for brunch, lunch, not dinner. It's the same for people with cognitive impairment and dementia. They want to do things in their best window. Pick it for them. The last one is be a detective when you notice a sudden change in your loved one. Often what we find is that if a person's behavior suddenly changes, it's because they have an unmet need. So you have to be a little bit of a detective. So I would probably recommend writing down a checklist of things that it could possibly be and providing the solutions to eliminate them as you go. So think, are they in pain? Are they thirsty? Are they hungry? Are they recovering from sickness? Are they ill at the moment? Are they tired, overstimulated? Is it boredom? So they might not be able to recognize these needs in themselves. So that's part of the carer role, is being the detective. And then going on to don'ts, this is the last one. Don't limit a person's function by assuming they can't do something. Just because they can't do something one day doesn't mean they can't do it the next day. So it's really important to revisit that, because as soon as you put them in a box of, oh, they don't watch TV anymore, they're not interested, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to listen, they wouldn't want to watch their favorite show that they enjoyed 30 years ago. So you have to be creative and motivated in revisiting things. Don't point out mistakes. What's the point? It's awful when someone points out a mistake that I've made. It doesn't feel nice if you've got no insight into what's happening. It's just best to go with the flow. And I guess the same thing for don't argue. Again, what's the point? I think it's more important to step into their world and agree. Otherwise, you're just likely to cause that person distress because they can't see, or they might not be able to see your point of view. Instead, it's just really important to recognize and validate the emotions that they're feeling. So you can say things like, I can see you're really upset. I would be upset too if I were in your situation. Is there something you need? Can I help you? And the last one is don't forget to have fun. My gosh, I think in a carer role, it's so serious. There's a lot on your plate. There's a lot to think about, but I cannot tell you how important it is to have a good belly laugh. And when something funny happens, or when there's an opportunity to do something fun with your loved one, you should take it, because it's so important to still do all the fun things that bond you and that you can enjoy together.
Eliza, thank you. I mean, that's such a good rundown of, I suppose, things to look out for. Some, really good hints around getting engaged with the medical, the medical field, building those relationships, relying on them, but also some practical do's and don'ts are really helpful in that space too. It's worth pointing out tonight, we would love to hear from you as well. So if you do have questions for Eliza, or as we go through for Amy or James, or potentially myself as well, please pop them into the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat or the question and answers throughout the session, and we will be able to answer questions throughout the session as well. Eliza, thank you for, I suppose, giving such a good rundown of cognition and changes there and what we can do, and helpful hints. Amy, I was going to ask you if you could talk to us around potentially simple strategies that we can put in place at home to help us remain independent and healthy whilst at home. So I'll hand over to
Yeah,
you on that.
absolutely. So whilst there's lots that you can do at home, if you're experiencing any cognitive changes, there are also lots that you can do at home to remain independent if you've got physical changes. And I'm also just going to share with you my screen. I've got a couple of slides that I can talk you through. So there is lots that you can put in place for yourself at home to maintain your independence. And one of those things would be to consider equipment and aids. Things like a shower chair. And it's interesting because in the past, when I've recommended equipment, often the person's response is something like, but if I start to sit down in the shower or to prepare a meal, I'll decondition, I'll lose my stamina. But the purpose of equipment is never to disable the person further. Equipment is aimed to do exactly the opposite. It helps you find a balance between being safe, conserving energy, and remaining independent. So I'll talk you through a couple of examples of how equipment can be helpful, starting with transfer rails. So transfer rails aim to do exactly as the name suggests, to help you transfer. And this could be in and out of the car, up and down the stairs, or on and off the toilet. So transfer rails, or grab rails as they're otherwise known as, are very helpful and are a great alternative for the basin, doorknob, or any other piece of equipment that you are reaching towards that is not designed to support you in that way. I would highly recommend grab rails in the bathroom environment where risk of slips is very high. They are made of steel, they're very sturdy and firmly secured to the wall. While I mentioned falls, I will say that they are the leading cause of loss of independence and disability for older adults. So a lot of equipment out there serves the additional purpose of being a falls prevention strategy. While we're talking about the bathroom space, if you have a shower over bath setup, there are equipment called bath benches. And these are really great to allow you to sit down and swing your legs over the hob as opposed to stepping over. It's much safer. There are also rails that you can have outside of the bathroom space. This here is a bed transfer rail. Really great if you are experiencing difficulty with repositioning in bed or transferring from a lying to a sitting position. Bed transfer rails are also really great to avoid you as the carer providing that physical support, because we know that that can cause injury to you. But moving away from transfer rails, there are also aids for things like dressing. If you find any aspect of dressing difficult, for example, the fine motor movement that you need for doing up buttons, there are aids called button hooks. They're fantastic. There are also long-handled reaches. This is helpful if you want to pick up items from the floor, like those socks or that towel that you dropped. There are also shoe horns and sock donners. So long-handled reaches, shoe horns, and sock donners are really great to avoid needing to bend forward. We see a lot of falls that happen in those kind of postures, and this can help avoid that. If you experience back pain or dizziness bending forward, they're also very helpful for that kind of purpose. In more recent years, there's been a lot of development in aids for eating and meal preparation. If you experience any difficulty with eating, there are aids called adaptive cutlery. If you experience tremors, for example, weighted cutlery can be very helpful because it stabilizes your tremor. If you find the weight that you fatigue from it, another option is to consider built-up cutlery. And built-up cutlery is good because you can grasp instead of using more of a pinch grip, which requires more fine motor strength. But speaking about meal preparation, something that I frequently recommend is a kettle tipper. And these are fantastic because pouring boiling hot water from a heavy kettle can be very risky if you've got upper limb weakness or a tremor. So kettle tippers are a mechanism that allows the water to tip out, and it also heats on that mechanism so you don't have to lift. They're fantastic. There are also things that can help you open jars. There are aids that can help you peel and chop your vegetables. There are, of course, things like thermomixers and even Uber Eats. It's really about what is important to you. If it's important to you to maintain your independence in meal preparation or any activity of daily living, from gardening to driving to medication management, it's very likely that there is an adaptive aid or an equipment out there that can support you to do so. You don't need to struggle through the activity, and you may not need to ask someone to do it for you. I'd encourage you to reach out to our help at home services, which James will speak about in a little bit, to get an OT to come out and do a home assessment and discuss some options with you. But I hope that what you can gather is that there's a lot out there.
I mean,
Thanks, Thomas.
some of those aids, I mean, I think most people are very familiar with the grabber. That's a very handy thing. But a sock donor, that's fantastic. And the things that there's a solution for a problem that you may not have even thought about, but you're really struggling with, and having professionals come in and be able to support is wonderful, and being able to really enable you to be independent. But I think, you know, even before we kind of get to using those aids or needing that support to come in, Amy, do you have thoughts or tips around healthy aging, remaining independent, and things, you know, kind of the 101 you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to recognize that healthy aging spans across the lifetime. It's not something that you do when you come of a certain age. So I think it should come as no surprise that healthy aging approaches include things like exercise and diet. So it's recommended that you do 30 minutes of exercise a day, and that could be anything from Tai Chi to dancing, swimming, or lawn bowls. And when it comes to your diet, older adults are more prone to osteoporosis and osteoarthritis. So calcium and vitamin D is very important. You can obtain that nutritionally through fish or dairy products, or you can have a chat to your GP about vitamin supplements. Something that I harp on a lot about at Monty that I think is very underrated is water. Our bodies are made up 60% of water, and dehydration in older adults can lead to urinary tract infections, kidney stones, low blood pressure, and fatigue. So 2 liters of water or 8 glasses a day. Another approach that is very underrated is cognitive engagement. And cognitive engagement is anything that requires brain power. So think about things like playing chess, crossword puzzles, attending a lecture, learning a new language, or playing a musical instrument. And it's important to have a variety of activities that you're engaging in. So if you always do the crossword puzzle, try the Sudoku. If you always play bridge, try Mahjong. One great way to challenge your brain is to engage your non-dominant hand in everyday activities. So when you go to bed tonight, brush your teeth with your left hand, pour a glass of water with your left hand, or whichever is your non-dominant. That's a great way to challenge yourself. But outside of these approaches, as I mentioned earlier, falls are the leading cause of loss of independence in older adults, and 1 in every 5 falls leads to a hip fracture. And while you can live a very healthy life with a hip fracture, I thought I would just talk through some strategies that you can put in place at home to prevent a fall. And one of the things is to look at the shoes that you are wearing. So your feet, when you get older, you experience sensation changes and your balance will change as well. So what's important is that you want your shoes to be foolproof. That requires having a back to your shoe, as well as a wide toe box at the front to allow for plenty of movement. You want to make sure that your shoes are the correct length and that the heels have a wide base of support to allow more contact on the floor. Think also about the lighting in your home, especially lighting at nighttime. Vision changes are very common in older adults. So you might want to leave the bathroom light on or use a night light. If you find that sort of thing bothersome, you can use a motion censored light in the bedroom and in your bathroom. And finally, clutter. Tripping over electrical cords, boxes, and that very beautiful Persian rug is something that we see very often. Have another look at your space, have a think about the way things are organized and if they can be reorganized or stored away. Persian rugs look just as beautiful on the wall as they do on the floor, and they're a great alternative and a great falls prevention strategy to have it on the wall. Unfortunately, we do recognize that falls do happen at home, and that's where injury prevention strategies come into play. And injury prevention strategies are aimed to reduce the significance of the injury when you have a fall. if you live alone or spend long periods of time alone at home, I'd recommend something like a Vital Call, which is a personal response alarm. It's a pendant that you wear around your neck, and it's got a button on it that links you to emergency services. And that can reduce the amount of time that you spend on the floor in the event that you have a fall. So as I mentioned before, Help at Home services can help you link up with a lot of these different falls prevention strategies. So I'd really recommend reaching out to them. Thanks, Thomas.
No, Amy, thank you. And I do think hopefully there's a few people who tried to do things with their non-dominant hand tonight, because that will give us many, hopefully good belly laughs from Eliza there. So do watch out for that. But I think also some really good tips and probably good things for us to look out for. James, as people notice these things happening in their life, changes with cognition, changes in physical ability, or maybe thinking, maybe I need that OT assessment. What sort of supports can you actually get in the community to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like from a Help at Home perspective, it's vast what we can do to service clients and consumers in the community. I don't have a PowerPoint like the other two girls, but I'm just going to sort of off the cuff sort of do some talking. But in particular, I guess Help at Home, we sort of support people with personal care in particular. So whether that be they need assistance with showering, bathing, toileting, we're definitely there to, I guess, with professional care workers to assist with that. We look at domestic assistance as well. So whether it be a consumer needing to tidy their home, help with, I guess, changing the bed linen, cleaning the bathroom, tidying the house or unit or apartment up. We're definitely there to assist with that as well. What we're seeing more and more of these days as well is 24-hour care that we assist with. With 24-hour care in particular, we usually see this occur when, say, for example, a consumer will go in for, say, a procedure, say a cataract surgery, for example, or something like that, and will need extra assistance when they come home from that cataract surgery, and will need a support or a care worker to actually sleep there overnight in case they do need assistance during the night. Registered nurses, in particular, we use a lot in the community as well, for things like wound care in particular, and sort of pressure injuries, catheter care as well, for obviously more of our NDIS clients and clients that have more high care needs. Allied health services, so this is obviously a really big one and a big one close to my heart. Occupational therapy, obviously Amy's definitely already touched on how we sort of can utilize that in the community. Exercise physiology and physio are massive ones for us, and are utilized a lot in full.
So what kind of services could, say, for instance, I mean, if you were in the community and accessing physio, can that be at your home? Is it in a day centre?
Absolutely.
How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be either. So we obviously have a lot of consumers and clients that utilize physio in the home. So they'll have a physio or an exercise physiologist come into the home and do a service with them in the home. We can also link up with physio departments or private practices around the community. And if they're interested in more of, say, a group exercise class or something along those lines, we can definitely look into that for them as well, for consumers as well. So it's sort of endless, I guess, in terms of it's the way that the consumer wants the care sort of delivered in a lot of ways. So dietetics, podiatry, also obviously whether it's in home or if it's actually going to a private practice as well, for people utilizing home care packages in particular, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But yeah, they're definitely all services that can be utilized. Companionship services are a really big part of what we do in the community with our care workers and consumers, is getting care workers in the home to have really meaningful and just free-flowing conversations with our clients, whether that be them getting to play a game that they love, like a game of chess or mahjong, or taking them for a coffee down the road to a local cafe. to try and engage them again with the community, the local community. So, and I guess linking with companionship, it can also take on that sort of domestic assistance side of things as well. So whilst tidying the home, we have a lot of consumers that love to have a chat whilst our care workers are assisting with tidying up around the home. So yeah, they're just a few of the I guess things and services that we can offer at Help at Home.
It's a big breadth, isn't it? I mean,
it's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
It's everything from professional and allied health, clinical supports. I suppose the nuts and bolts of living. That's social support.
Yeah, it's really endless what we can do. And I guess the big thing from Help at Home in particular is the support of our care coordinators like myself that can actually really sit down and really tailor a care plan for the consumer, along with the family input as well, and making sure that we're getting the right type of care worker in for each consumer.
You help manage as well, don't you? I suppose the case management side in the community, help people understand what they can access, how they can access it, where the government funding works as well, and how that supports people.
Yeah, so I guess you're touching on now that government funding side of things. Help at Home definitely can assist with that, and with the home care packages through My Aged Care in particular. So with My Aged Care, what will happen in the first instance is that you will be assessed by an ACAT team, assessment team, and then obviously from that, you will then obviously be deemed whether or not a level package will be approved and assigned to you. The leveled packages are leveled 1 through 4. So levels 1 and 2 are more for your lower care needs at home. And obviously these are all subsidised by the government. And your levels 3 and 4 are obviously for your higher care needs consumers. So you're looking at your level 3 and 4s with your personal care side of things, 24-hour care. That may be necessary at any one time. But yeah, as I said, the My Aged Care website in particular has a stack of information on obviously getting up and running with these home care level packages. So yeah, definitely best to go to that website and have a really good look at it, because it's got a lot of information that can sort of get your journey started in the home care system to start with. So
I mean, it's a great resource, isn't it? Being able to go to My Aged Care. But I suppose the other thing to say in this is Montefiore's got this wonderful continuum of care that can help with people from at home, helping them organise those assessments. So can they reach out to the Help at Home offices, James, if someone's just confused how to get through it?
Definitely. And that's what we as care coordinators are there to do as well, to assist with that journey. It can be very confusing, the My Aged Care system, and a lot of unknown and foreign areas for a lot of people. So we're sort of there to guide them along the journey, absolutely, and make sure that they're getting all the information that they do require. So at any time, please do not hesitate to call Help at Home, and one of the 5 care coordinators like myself will be able to assist you in any way. Absolutely.
Oh, it's fantastic, James. Thank you. And I mean, there's such a breadth of services in the community that are available to support people. Is there a time where you think residential care starts to become an option that people need to consider?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a conversation that I like to have quite early in the journey, so we're not sort of, I guess, springing that upon them like further down the track. But as obviously Eliza and in particular spoke about, carer burnout in particular and fatigue are massive factors that we see. And I guess, making sure that we are having that conversation early enough that it's not getting to a stage with care workers in particular and family members where we are seeing that burnout in particular.
It is one of those, I suppose, difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
Perhaps more to start than to actually have sometimes with people. I think there is some absolute benefits of residential care for people, and I think one of them is actually the changing relationships that you can have with people when they're at home. You know, you're caring for a person, you might be looking after a spouse, or it's a child looking after a parent, and that relationship starts to change. It becomes more of a carer's relationship, which does change things, doesn't it? And I do think residential care can really support people to go back into having a much more normal relationship, whether that's a spouse or a child type relationship, you know, parent relationship. Respite, I mean, for people that are at home and in home care, using home care services or community services, respite can often be a great option for people to take a break. You know, you might have that, your primary carer may be needing to go into hospital. You know, they might need to have some time for themselves. Or maybe it's even they just need a week where they're not having to support someone at home just for a little bit of, you know, rest and recuperation. And respite in residential care can be a great thing. Do you see much of that, you know, within
Absolutely, all the time.
and do you see, where do you see the benefits of that in kind of that continuum of care?
Yeah, look, it's vital, and it's vital for the carers and the family's mental well-being, and also, yeah, it's just really, really vital that we get it in place. And as I said, we have the discussion early, and as you touched on, it can be quite a tricky subject to bring up with a lot of families, and a lot of families are quite private and like to keep it quite in tight and niche. So I guess from a care coordinator's point of view, building up that rapport with a family in a first instance is so vital for us, and making sure that we're having those tricky conversations along the way, and not all letting it build up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think having those conversations early, having the conversations early when you start to notice changes in a person and accessing them in the community, but also then for residential care, having them early, being honest in them as well, I think is a great thing. Accessing respite so that you get those periods where you can have a break. I mean, I know that, you know, my experience in residential care, people come in and often have such a good time and they feel very safe in an environment with support 24 hours a day, and they, you know, it changes that relationship that many people often stay, which is a wonderful thing for the person themselves. And I do think sometimes you do reach that point at home where you try and hang on and stay independent in the community, but it takes a toll. Residential care can be a real help for people with physical frailty, but also as a person's cognition changes, it can be sometimes a bit harder and perhaps a bit more risky in the environment, in the community, for them to stay at home.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to point out one more. Obviously, I spoke briefly about obviously the home care package system as well. Obviously, with Help at Home in particular, we do obviously private fee for service as well. So for people that potentially are waiting for a home care package, we can start services straight away, even if that home care package hasn't come into effect yet. There usually is around a 3 to 6 month wait on a lot of these home care packages. So it is important that the consumers and families do know that they don't have to wait for that package to come through if they are really requiring services in the meantime.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about today was residential care, and dispelling a myth of once you enter residential aged care, you don't exit residential aged care. I think we had a wonderful example of one of the people that we work with here earlier this year, booked themselves a plane ticket and went to America for 7 weeks. And that was a resident. They left, they had a great time, they've come back. We were able to support them through that process. It was a really wonderful thing. I didn't know whether, Eliza, there was anything you wanted to add around kind of relationships or the benefits of residential care, particularly for people that are experiencing cognitive decline?
Well, I think just personally from my experience, if I can draw on that, I mean, my grandfather moved into Monty last year, and I guess the catalyst for that was COVID, and what we found was with COVID and with social isolation and with, not basically he wasn't allowed to go out into the community anymore because we were in isolation. He wasn't driving, so he lost his skills in driving. He lost his skills in navigating the local Woolworths. So there are a lot of things that sort of came to the forefront, and then it got to a point where at night he felt really unsafe, and he'd get into bed really early because he was worried about his bed mobility, and then he would avoid going to the bathroom during the night because he was worried about getting up during the night and having to wee. So you could see there was this cycle of unsafe behaviours that could result in a UTI, that could result in a fall. Like there was all these sorts of things happening, and I was stressed. My uncle and my dad were really stressed. My grandfather was really stressed. And when he moved into Monty, it really helped us have a relationship with him free of stress for the first time in a long time, where we weren't coordinating, having to visit him, having to make sure he's all right. I wasn't waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, has he fallen out of bed? Is he okay? And it just meant that the time now that we spend together is quality. Without the stress of everything else that comes with having a loved one living in the community that has cognitive impairment, and physical challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think picking up on the, the stress there, I think sometimes, there's a danger that we don't have the conversations because they're a bit hard, and then we hit a crisis point. And then all of a sudden we have the stress of the crisis point and the stress of a conversation. So being prepared, I think, would be one of the tips from me around, certainly have your conversations early. Involve the person in their choice. The person that may be entering care, they have that choice in there, but the family, you can also help guide that. Make sure that you have things in place like a power of attorney and an enduring guardianship. While you're able, and while we're all able, we should be making, decisions about what happens if I can't make my own decision, or I need someone to support me to make a decision. Who do I want that to be? And kind of getting that in place right up front. I do think that's it can take more stress out of those situations as we move forward. I do think that the other thing to say in all of this is it can seem really daunting. But there are great professionals throughout the industry, but certainly here at Monty, that can help guide you both from these early stages in the community, help you kind of work through how you're going to have conversations if you need to have them, help remind you to get this documentation in place or get that power of attorney, navigate my aged care, and then also support through assessments and support within community and residential aged care options. I was going to say, I think just noting on the chat here, there have been some comments come through around, using one provider and then potentially using another provider for services when they don't have staff. There are a lot of options out there in the industry. And I think that the most important thing would be around making sure that the one that you choose is the right one for you, and using those options out there to My Aged Care to get information, but talking to people like James around help at home, talking to our wonderful admissions team is really wonderful. To all the participants, I can see we've got quite a few. If there are any questions before we wrap up tonight, please pop them into the chat. If we don't get an opportunity to answer them now, we might be able to contact you afterwards and talk to you offline regarding any questions that come through. The chat has, sorry, I've just seen something come through. There's a Q&A button, sorry, I've been referring to it as chat. There's a question and answers button down the bottom. Please, if you do have anything there, I can see a few people have put some comments and questions in there. That would be the way to do so. But while they're coming in, I just really wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining tonight. It's been hopefully helpful. We will be sending out some information around different links, different contact numbers that can help you really know where to begin, and what to do. And I think if I was to take one takeaway from tonight from each of us, James, what would be the takeaway that you would want for any of the participants tonight to know?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much help out there and obviously with Help at Home in particular, we're there for you, I guess, every step of the way, from that initial home care section, whether residential is an option, but obviously, yeah, we're there to assist you with anything that you may need some assistance with, and obviously also looking at the My Aged Care system as well. It can be a bit of a minefield, and we're there to sort of assist with that as well, definitely.
That's awesome. Thanks, James. Eliza, do you have any thoughts or a final thought for us?
I guess along the same theme is don't feel like you need to know it all. You can engage professionals who are experts. You can engage them for free over Dementia Support Australia, over that 24/7 free line, or Dementia Australia, or through us as well at Monty. We're in your local community. So please reach out.
Yeah, thanks, Eliza. And Amy, any takeaway from you?
I guess what I was thinking is just the fact that you don't need to struggle through an activity at home. There are very creative equipment and adaptive aids out there that can support you. So do some research or contact us for more information.
Yeah, Amy, look, thank you. Thank you for that. Before I share my final thought, there is 2 questions that have come through, and thank you. One came through asking, what should I do if I come across a person with dementia on the street and they look confused and uncomfortable? I suppose the first thing is, if you do see someone that's in distress, being there as a support is a wonderful thing, as long as it's not placing you in danger. Would be, you know, don't look after yourself as you look after someone else. If the person's able to talk to you and tell you where they're from and maybe get some support, maybe give you a phone number, that's great. The other thing to say is, if you do find someone and you're concerned about their welfare, you can call an ambulance for them, or you can call the police. Both of those, you know, 000 is a fantastic support for people. I know I've come across a person from a disability group home in the community once before, called an ambulance, they arrived really quickly. They were able to make sure that the person was safe and well taken care of. It's a great question there. There has been a couple of questions that have come up in relation to recording. Yes, we do have a recording of the session. We will make that available, and there are recordings for the previous Spotlight sessions as well. So hopefully we'll be able to send out some information on them. I just want to again thank everyone for joining tonight. It's been a great session. Thank you to the panelists for joining, sharing your expertise. My 2 takeaways are sock donor, that's fantastic. Everyone should have one. And do something with your left hand. But most importantly, reach out to professionals, reach out to your social network. There's a ton of help. Montefiore is a wonderful resource in that great continuum of care from community through residential. And we're here, and we'll send out our contact details for everyone to have on file. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great night.